To support the author, subscribe to the channel and watch the video to the end. Enjoy listening. Tatiana has always been a caring mother. She raised her son, Maxim, alone, and from early childhood she tried to be not only a mother for him, but also a true friend. Maxim grew up an active and sociable boy, and Tatiana was proud that he had many friends and hobbies. They often spent time together. They walked in the park, went to nature for the weekend, and played board games in the evenings. Tatiana tried to pay attention to every moment, believing that this would help them become closer to each other. But lately she has noticed that Maxim has become somewhat withdrawn. His smile became less frequent, and his conversations with her became shorter. He often locked himself in his room and spent time at his computer, and when Tatiana tried to ask who he was talking to, he just waved her off, saying that everything was fine with him. This caused Tatiana anxiety. She felt that something was wrong, but she did not know how to reach her son. One evening, when Tatiana was cooking dinner, the sound of her phone caught her attention. She noticed that Maxim was talking in his room and speaking softly, as if he was hiding something. Her heart clenched with anxiety. She always taught her son to speak openly, to share his thoughts and experiences, but now something was bothering her. Unable to contain her curiosity, she went to the door of his room and reached for the door handle. At that moment, she heard his voice, and the words he said made her freeze in place. "Are you sure she's going to die?" "What is it?" he asked, and there was something sinister in his voice. Tatiana felt herself shudder. Those words were like lightning, tearing through the silence. She couldn't believe her ears. Who is she? What's happening? Tatiana's heart began to beat faster, and she opened the door a crack, trying to be inconspicuous. She listened to the conversation, but her thoughts were racing in different directions. Maxim continued to speak, and his voice sounded so cold that Tatiana could not contain her fear. "Yes, I will do everything," he said, and there was determination in his words. "If something goes wrong, I'll take care of it." Tatiana, not knowing what to do, felt a chill run down her spine. She pressed herself against the wall, trying not to make a sound. She understood that something serious was going on, and her son, whom she had raised with love, ended up in some terrible business. Maxim continued the conversation, and each of his words caused Tatiana more and more fear. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll get everything ready." She must not find out. Tatiana, unable to listen any longer, quickly returned to the kitchen and sat down at the table, trying to come to her senses. She couldn't believe that her son, whom she considered kind and sympathetic, could be involved in something so dark. Thoughts of what he might be up to haunted her. As soon as Maxim came out of his room, Tatiana decided that she had to talk to him. She couldn't ignore it. "Maxim," she said when he entered the kitchen, "we need to talk." Her son looked at her in disbelief. His face changed, and Tatiana saw something strange in his eyes, a mixture of anxiety and tension. "About what?" "What is it?" he asked, trying to look casual. "I heard you talking on the phone." Tatiana began, her voice trembling. "What did you mean when you talked about someone who would die?" Maxim froze. He didn't expect his mother to overhear his conversation. His face turned pale, and he seemed to be searching for words. "Mom, it's not what you think," he said, his voice strained. "What's wrong with that?" Tatiana asked, feeling anger and fear intertwine in her chest. "I can't believe you're involved in something dangerous." "It's just a conversation with a friend," Maxim said, but there was something in his voice that made Tatiana uneasy. "What friend?" she insisted. "Why can't you tell me what it was about?" Maxim sighed, and Tatiana saw how his gaze became tense. He hesitated, and that made her even more nervous. "Okay, he said finally. It's not that simple. I'm just helping someone I know with business. It's not about you. Tatiana felt her heart constrict with fear. She knew that Maxim wasn't telling the whole truth, but she didn't know how to reach her son. If it's dangerous, you have to tell me, she said, trying to keep her voice calm. I'm your mother, and I can help you if you open up. Maxim seemed to be vacillating between the desire to tell and the fear of consequences. Nothing's going to happen, he said, his voice a little calmer. It's just a conversation, and I don't want you to worry. Tatiana couldn't believe that her son could be in such a situation. She remembered how much she had invested in his upbringing, how she had tried to instill moral values in him. She didn't want to lose him to some shady business. I'm not going to ignore this, she said, her voice becoming more determined. You have to be honest with me, Maxim. I know you're not that kind of person. Maxim looked at her, and a spark of understanding flashed in his eyes. He knew she was right, and deep down he also understood that their relationship had become strained. Okay, I'll tell you, he said, and Tatiana felt her heart beat faster. It has to do with a guy from school. He got me involved in some business. I didn't want you to worry. Tatiana felt her fear turn to anger. How could you do that? She said, trying to contain her emotions. You should have come to me and told me what was going on. Maxim lowered his eyes, and Tatiana saw remorse in him. I thought I could handle it on my own, he said in a low voice. I didn't want to bother you. Tatiana came closer and hugged her son, saying, You'll never be alone in this. I'm always there to support you, but you have to be honest with me. Maxim nodded, and Tatiana felt that a new understanding had emerged between them. She knew it wasn't going to be an easy path, but now they began to talk openly about what was going on in Maxim's life. Tatiana tried to understand him, and he, in turn, became more open. They discussed together how to avoid problems and how to deal with difficulties. A few weeks passed, and Tatiana noticed that Maxim began to change. He started studying better. He made more friends, and he seems to have become happier. But Tatiana still remained wary, keeping a close eye on what was happening around her. One evening, as they were sitting at dinner, Maxim said, Mom, I want you to know that I appreciate your support. I know it was hard for me to open up sometimes, but now I realize how important it is. Tatiana smiled and, looking into his eyes, replied, I will always be there for you, Maxim. The main thing is trust. We can overcome everything if we are together. Maxim nodded, and at that moment there was a special unity between them. They understood that they could trust each other, and this became the basis of their relationship. Despite the difficulties they had gone through, Tatiana knew that their bond had only strengthened. Now that she thought about how her son's hand reached for the door handle, she realized that this moment was the beginning of a new stage in their lives. They learned to be open together, and this gave them the opportunity to build a relationship based on trust and understanding. But at that moment, when everything seemed to be getting better, Tatiana noticed that Maxim had started spending a lot of time in his room again. She decided that she would not ignore it and tried to talk to him again. Maxim, she said one day, when he had locked himself in his room again, do you want to tell me what's going on? I feel like you're hiding something again. Maxim, hearing her voice, left the room with a worried expression on his face. Mom, it's okay. I just have a lot of things to do, he replied, trying to avoid her gaze. Tatiana couldn't help but notice how he averted his eyes. This worried her even more. I want you to know that I am always ready to help. If something is wrong, you can tell me, she said, trying to keep her voice calm. Maxim sighed, and Tatiana saw how he hesitated. Okay, he said finally. I'm just A little bit under pressure. We have a lot of assignments at school and I'm trying to do everything in time. Tatiana nodded, but her intuition told her that he wasn't telling the whole truth. She decided not to insist, but deep down she knew she had to stay on her guard. Soon Tatiana noticed that her son began to communicate more and more with one particular friend, who, in her opinion, did not inspire confidence. She remembered Maxime. Talking about him, and her anxiety only increased. One day when she returned home from work, she saw Maxime sitting on the couch, talking to this friend via video link. He looked tense and wary. Tatiana felt her heart beat faster. "Maxime," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, "would you like to introduce your friend to me?" Maxime quickly turned off the video call and looked at her with fright. "Mom, it's not what you think. He's just helping me with my studies," he said. But Tatiana couldn't believe his words. "I just want you to be careful," she said. "I've noticed that you've changed lately." Maxime sighed again. "I know, but it's okay, really. I have a lot of things to do, and sometimes I need a little time for myself." Tatiana felt her anxiety growing. She understood that she had to do something to protect her son,